Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. You're probably confused, like a lot of people. I got this question on the radio this morning, just asking, "Hey, Rick, can you explain? There's so many legal things going on with President Trump. It's hard to keep track of them all. Can you tell us what's going on with it?" And so I spent about 20 minutes doing that on the radio, answering questions and the like. So I wanted to provide that for you as well. But the first thing you need to know is this lawfare against President Donald Trump is designed for a very specific purpose, to keep him off the ballot. That's what the purpose is. The left is attempting to keep him off the ballot. Why do they want to keep him off the ballot? Because they know if he's allowed to be on the ballot and there is an actual fair election, that you will put him back into office. And their best chance of keeping him out of the White House is to deny him access to the ballot. That's why in places like Minnesota and Michigan, local Democrats have attempted to disqualify President Trump from being on their ballots. And in the last 2 weeks, in both Michigan and in Minnesota, the state courts have ruled, and state Supreme Courts have ruled very definitively that Donald Trump is eligible. There's nothing in state law that would make him ineligible for being on the ballot. They're not looking at the constitutional question. The Supreme Court, when given the constitutional question of whether he'd be allowed on the ballot or whether you could disqualify somebody for other reasons, has clearly said, no, you cannot. Their qualifications for president are in the Constitution. You don't get to make them up and deny people access to the ballot for a federal office. Ironically, this is a lot along the lines of the Thornton decision, which a lot of us decried because it said that you could not, in fact, term limit a member of Congress, a senator or a House member, from the state legislature, because that's changing the terms of what it takes to be a U.S. congressman or U.S. senator that are outlined in the U.S. Constitution. That's why when the U.S. Senate went from being picked by the states rather than directly elected, and now the senators are directly elected, it took a constitutional amendment to change that law. So if somebody wants to deny Donald Trump a spot on the ballot, they need to have a constitutional amendment to change the eligibility requirements. Now, interestingly, the attempt with both of the Michigan and the Minnesota case were making a claim that Donald Trump had engaged in insurrection related to January 6th, and the rightful claim that Donald Trump had that the election was fishy and Donald Trump, and that he was actually the rightly elected candidate for president. So that claim and the willingness to stand up and fight for that claim, not urge anybody to storm the Capitol, not urge anybody to take violent actions, just to legally extend all of his legal rights for as long as he could. That's the claim that Jack Smith and others and the Democrats are hanging their hat on to try to disqualify Donald Trump for the presidency. But get this, it's really, really interesting. Jack Smith hasn't even charged Donald Trump with insurrection. In the DC case, where he's got all the crime of election denying, apparently is a newly created crime by Jack Smith, which is being decided in the DC courts. That is in fact does not conclude a charge of insurrection. So even Jack Smith has not yet come up with an insurrection charge that could be used to disqualify President Trump. But that's where this is all leading to. So I'm going to take you through the 4 cases real quickly. But just understand, last 2 weeks, 2 state Supreme Courts have said very clearly that the states can't remove Donald Trump from the ballot. They cannot do so because he meets the state requirements to be president, to be on the ballot. And that's the only thing that matters. So recognize This attempt is a failure at this point, but these court cases are attempting to get around that. So let's just look at the 4 court cases really quick. First one is that we're going to talk about is the classified documents case. This classified documents case is being heard down in Florida, and the special counsel Jack Smith is the prosecutor on it, and he is prosecuting this largely for the simple reason that, you know what, the FBI and the Department of Justice really don't want Donald Trump to have the documents, or to have the public have the documents through declassification. Don't want the public to have declassified documents that get to the bottom of who was responsible for the Russia collusion hoax. That's what that case is about. It's a continuation of the Department of Justice cover-up of the Russian collusion hoax and the entire coup operation within our government to try to basically end the Trump presidency or delegitimize the Trump presidency. So that is what that case is about. You'll note you haven't heard much from the special prosecutor who is looking at Joe Biden having all sorts of documents he was not legally allowed to have because he wasn't a former president. I guess having a bunch of documents sitting next to your Corvette in a garage that are classified is one thing, but having them in Mar-a-Lago with Secret Service all around, and most of them in a locked room, constitutes some kind of violation. I'm going to show you a picture that shows you the bias in this thing. Hopefully it's in this article. Oh, here you go. Here's the picture. Okay, note this picture and what it says at the bottom. This image contained in the indictment against former President Trump. Now, this was actually an image put in the indictment. Shows boxes of records in a storage room in Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida, that were photographed on November 12, 2021. Well, get this, in a storage room. Yeah, they were stored. And the storage room had a lock and key. But even more significantly, it appears, what's your impression of this? Your impression is, look at all those classified documents. Well, that's not what it is. These are documents, but the equivalent of one of these boxes is the entirety of the documents that they claim that were classified that President Trump held. And Donald Trump, by virtue of shipping them declassified while he was president, into declassified them. He also waved the magic wand and told staff, these documents are declassified. This is after a year of fighting with the FBI to get these documents declassified, and the FBI blocking him because these documents are devastating to the FBI and Department of Justice, who are busy trying to cover up their crimes. So that's what that fight is about. It's about whether Donald Trump, we will be able to have in the public domain documents showing the actual malfeasance that occurred during the Russia collusion hoax perpetrated by our intelligence agencies against the President of the United States, an attempt to remove him from office. And Jack Smith is attempting to cover up the coup. So that's number one. That's the first case and what it's about. It's a looking back case. Second case is the one filed by the New York Attorney General. The New York Attorney General filed a case saying that Donald Trump had fraudulently overvalued properties while getting loans against those properties as collateral. Now, if Donald Trump said that, I've got a property worth $200 million and it was really worth $20 million, and a bank gave him $100 million worth of loans without the proper collateral, that'd be a problem. That'd be against the law. But let me just share with you, I don't know how many of you have actually gone and tried to get a loan for like a mortgage or something, but all I know is you want to get a loan for a mortgage, so you're subjecting yourself to a financial proctology exam in terms of discovering whether or not you actually can pay the mortgage back, A. And B, is the property worth what you say, more than you say you want to borrow? The answer is that, so for your mortgage and for my mortgage, the company, the banks are just scrupulous in making certain that they're not loaning out money for property that is worth less than the money they're loaning. That's what they do. That's their job. So what the New York Attorney General would have us believe is that all these big banks had Donald Trump come to them and he said, "Hey guys, I got this property down in Mar-a-Lago that's worth $400 million. And so give me money using that as a collateral and I'll pay you back." And they said, "Oh, whatever you say, 400 million, great. All right. We'll just take your word on that. We're not going to do an independent appraisal." And they gave him the money. And so you ask, so the victim of this apparently is the banks, but the banks got paid back the money that was borrowed with interest. There was no default. And so there is no victim in this supposed crime. Secondly, and this is just astonishing, the judge in charge of this case waved a magic wand and said, Donald Trump is guilty of fraud. You know what he didn't do? He didn't allow Donald Trump to actually present evidence showing he wasn't. He took at face value a New York Attorney General assessment of the value of the Mar-a-Lago property. This is just one example, which said the Mar-a-Lago property is worth $12 to $20 million. Well, actual people who do real estate, luxury real estate down in Palm Beach, value it in the $300 to $400 million range. And given the added value it has now, Donald Trump says it's probably $1 trillion property. And he's closer to right than wrong there. So the judge said, well, it's obviously a 15 to 20 million, $12 to $20 million property. The attorney general says so. And Donald Trump says, well, let me bring in my witnesses that say how much it's actually worth, who actually work in that real estate market and know something. And the judge said, nope, we don't need to hear from your witnesses, President Trump. You're guilty. So Elise Stefanik, representative from New York, just filed an ethics complaint against that judge, saying and wanting him to be admonished and truthfully removed from the case because he's clearly biased in what he's doing. He's not running an actual trial. He's running a kind of a kangaroo court. And right now, they're in the punishment phases. And what they can do in that court is they can say, well, we're going to punish you and you have to sell certain properties. You have to divest yourself of all your properties, say in New York State, or certain properties determined by the court. They can do that. They can effectively deny Donald Trump his property and sell it and force him to sell his properties, to pay a fine to the state and force him effectively out of business. That's what they're trying to do. That is the attempt. So what's the New York case about? The New York case is about destroying Donald Trump's financial wherewithal, destroying his ability to have the finances at his own disposal to defend himself, and send a message to anyone else that if you run as a billionaire, you make the mistake of winning. If you run against the establishment will come back and attempt to strip you of every dollar you have using every means possible, whether they are legal or not. So this is not only a warning shot against Donald Trump, it's a warning shot against anybody who has means, saying your means will not protect you. We will use the law to destroy you and take your stuff. So the costs now are much more than in terms of your personal wealth. And this is just creating a third world electoral system where those who lose, the left, those who don't like a candidate who runs, can after the fact go after their wealth for any reason and just make it up. Because remember, this judge specifically said, I don't want to hear what you have to say, Mr. Trump. Just answer the questions yes or no. Well, if the judge doesn't actually want to know what Donald Trump has to say, then he's not conducting an honest trial. And we know that because he took fraudulently offered valuations on the Mar-a-Lago property that are 20 times lower than the actual value of the property. That's how we know that this is a fraudulent case, and it's not, and it reeks of politics and turning and a warning shot against anyone who dares run, that they better toe the line. Otherwise, a crazy court somewhere will go after every single thing they own under fraudulent circumstances and attempt to bankrupt them and ruin them. So that's the case in New York State. Kind of fun, huh? You go to Georgia and you got this Fannie Willis crazy, Soros crazy, going after President Trump. By the way, I'm not going to talk about the New York City one because it's so bogus. It's an FEC. It's a complaint saying the election filings were wrong, and a complaint that the Federal Election Commission, which has jurisdiction over that, chose not to bring. And so a local prosecutor in New York thought they'd bring it. It's completely bogus. It doesn't have jurisdiction. It's not even worth talking about, but it is a case that's out there. But that's just a general harassment case. The Fannie Willis case, once again, Fannie Willis, a Soros prosecutor in Atlanta, Georgia. That's about making it so no lawyer in their right mind will work for Donald Trump in his upcoming in his political race. We see that lawyers who actually were providing legal advice to Donald Trump have been destroyed, have been bankrupted, forced to make prison POW type confessions on camera because they ran out of money. It's that simple. They ran out of money. They didn't, you don't have a capacity to sit there and not everybody's a billionaire. And so you go after attorneys who don't have a lot of money and you say, okay, we're going to basically bankrupt you. You're going to have to make a choice. Are you going to, because after we're done, you might win an appeal, but you're going to be millions of dollars in debt. And you'll never be able to make that money back. So the Fannie Willis case, which is about whether or not there was illegal happenings in Georgia, particularly Fulton County, that were engaged in election fraud, and Donald Trump's insistence on trying to press the case about election fraud in Georgia. That case is really all about dismembering the ability of President Trump to be able to assemble a legal team in 2024 who will be willing to work against any election fraud that occurs in 2024. That's what that's about. And when you see these young attorneys getting destroyed, Jenna Ellis and others, and Jenna, I've been on the air with Jenna Ellis. I've met with her many times. She's an honest person, but she just got destroyed by the power of the state, and didn't have. And I just quite honestly, people can look around and can say whatever they want, but nobody knows what you would do until you face the executioner yourself. And that's effectively what they did to a lot of these attorneys. So that's the Fannie Willis case. It's destroying Donald Trump's ability to get counsel. Now let's go to the DC case on election fraud, the Jack Smith case. DC overwhelmingly voted for Biden. DC hates Trump. So it's the ideal jury pool. It's such an ideal jury pool that Jack Smith has been using the DC grand jury to investigate the case that's down in Florida, the classified documents case. And he's been using that against the law because the case is involved it was happening in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. So he's supposed to have a grand jury in Florida. He's not using a grand jury in Florida. He's using a grand jury in D.C. because in D.C. you can get the D.C. grand jury to do things you couldn't get a grand jury in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, and out in Palm Beach to do. And Palm Beach is not a conservative area, by the way. Palm Beach is a Democratic area. It's a as we remember from the Gore v. Bush fight in 2000, is one of the counties that was busy counting hanging chads, chosen specifically by Al Gore because he thought he had the best chance of picking up votes there. Because Palm Beach is a 60-40, 65-35 Democrat county. So it's not like he wouldn't get a good grand jury pool in Palm Beach. The problem is he wouldn't get a perfect jury pool for his grand jury in Palm Beach. So, we've got this guy, this is November 6th in your headline here. Jack Smith, Trump stands alone in American history for his alleged crimes. So Donald Trump says, gee, it seems like everybody else in the whole history of the world has been able to say, I don't think this election was run fairly, and has been able to challenge that election. And everybody else has. We've had recounts go well beyond in Senate and congressional races, go well beyond even when they were supposed to be seated. We've had Congress itself having to decide which candidate won. We had Al Franken ended up winning in Minnesota on a third recount when they actually stopped counting. As soon as they got enough votes to get Al Franken ahead, they stopped counting. They didn't finish the count. They stopped once they got Al Franken ahead. So there's been lots of evidence. There's been lots of instances. We know that in 1960, that the fight between JFK and Richard Nixon, that there were continue 70, 80 years later, 70, I guess 60 years later, there continue pretty strong belief that Kennedy won Illinois because Cook County stole it. The Daley machine stole the state. Richard Nixon didn't challenge it because he decided that with the Cold War raging and Russia being a threat, that he couldn't weaken America. So he made that decision. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean that fraud didn't happen. Doesn't mean there weren't complaints about it. Doesn't mean there weren't recounts. Doesn't mean there weren't legal battles. I referred to this before, Gore v. Bush. Bush wins in Florida. That determines who's going to win the 2000 election. Al Gore files lawsuits. Al Gore files lawsuits that go and has a recount. He selectively picks, he has the best additional votes in. He doesn't pick Republican counties to recount because he's got a better chance of losing votes in those counties. So he cherry picks the counties he wants to recount, and they go to court and they fight it out in court. Bush wins the recount, but Gore continues to fight because he wants to have more recount. This is a state Supreme Court says, no, Gore, you're wrong. It goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decides 5-4 that George Bush, that the recount provisions have been met, and George Bush is the winner. Al Gore didn't go to jail. Al Gore engaged in aggressive attempts to change the outcome of the election because, as he should have, he had a right to take every legal measure to make certain the election was fairly held, fairly counted. That was within his right. The Attorney General for the U.S. in the Bush administration didn't go and sue Al Gore and charge him with trying to change the outcome of an election. I mean, he didn't. So Special Counsel Jack Smith is now trying to show that Donald Trump knew that he lost the election. And hence, every time as he was fighting, he was trying to overcome to override the rightful outcome. Well, let me just be clear. Most people in Washington, D.C. sat there and said, Trump probably lost this election. If, 4 states, you have to get 4 states where you're going to get, where you can show sufficient enough fraud to have those states individually say, we will not certify these elections. That's not a secret. It doesn't mean you don't have a right to say, wait a second, we're going to go around and we're going to examine these elections and we're going to show where the fraud was, which is what Donald Trump's campaign did. He had every right to do it. It doesn't mean that you can't go to the House of Representatives and the Senate when they're certifying the election and say, there's fraud in these elections and we object to the certified election results because the fraud is overwhelming and we need to take another look at it. We need to delay this proceeding. Nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to do that. It's within the law. It's actually following the law. So Jack Smith, on the other hand, says, well, you can't, suddenly it's a crime to press your legal rights and you're petitioning the government rights to have an election, to find whether an election was fairly or unfairly held, to challenge an election result. That's now criminalized under the Jack Smith world. And that's the case that they're really pinning their hopes on, because wrapped into that, Jack Smith has incorporated language talking about January 6th, even though January 6th has nothing to do with his indictments. And what their play is, what the left's play is with that, is with the Fani Willis one, their objective is strip Donald Trump of having attorneys to fight. The one in New York State, that one's all about, the New York AG one is all about strip Donald Trump of his money so he can't fight. The classified documents one is about strip Donald Trump of his claim of the delegitimizing of his presidency by the Department of Justice by denying him the ability to have the documents which prove the claim. And the fourth one is very simple. It's make it so Donald Trump is ineligible. It's an attempt to make it so Donald Trump would be found to be ineligible to be president of the United States. It's or get a conviction that's sufficient to cause people in America, people who haven't made up their mind, to say, I'm going to vote for somebody other than Trump because of Trump's legal problems. I think he must have been guilty. They found him guilty. And to try to get the 8 to 10% of the voters who decide in the last 2 weeks of the election and don't pay much attention to say, I can't vote for somebody who's a convicted felon. It doesn't matter if the conviction was fair or not. We're going to go and we're going to, and that is the purpose of the fourth one. Remember, Supreme Court has said that in the past that the criteria for running for president and for being president are in the Constitution. The criteria for Congress to impeach are in the Constitution. If Congress finds what's alleged by Jack Smith to be sufficient to impeach, then Congress could impeach based on that. The House could impeach, Senate could convict. But this is an attempt right now to alter the 2024 election. This is all about trying to deny you the ability to vote for Donald Trump, and B, to deny Donald Trump the ability to defend himself in the public square against these charges. Because, as you've heard, the Trump DC attorney, the federal judge, keeps putting gag orders on him. So he's not allowed to talk about the case. The prosecutor can talk about the case, but Donald Trump can't talk about the case. As the leading and most likely winner of the 2024 general election for president, Donald Trump is not allowed to defend himself against a legal attack that's founded in the crazy Department of Justice, which does not believe that they are above the law and fear Donald Trump becoming president more than anything else. Because when Donald Trump becomes president in 2024, and go after those who engaged in a coup d'etat in 2021 and 2022. I'm sorry, in 2017, 2018, 2019. He's going to do that. And so they've got to protect themselves. And Jack Smith is protecting the swamp. And the battle of the Trump presidency will be the battle over the swamp. Let's take a look at what people have to say. I'm going to go and just put this over here so I can see it easily. And ooh, that didn't work. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put it back over here so you guys don't have a headache. And let's just see what we have. Okay, Ron Lippman, I'll continue until people are charged and go to jail. Okay, hold on, I'm at the bottom here. I'm going to tell everyone, let's just start at the bottom. I don't really have time to read these, so I'm just going to read what we've got. I'm going to tell everyone, if Trump does not get a president, get ready for a real World War III. You think now it's bad, just wait. I'll be homeless and without. You know, Linda, we're in a time that I never thought we would be in our nation's history. And you know, the Biden administration is stumbling its way into what MSNBC is calling two and a half wars. And as they were worrying about Taiwan, I think it's the first time MSNBC's worried about Taiwan. And you know, the fact of the matter is, we have an administration right now who has weakened America in everything they've done. And I shudder to think if we ever find out what the private conversations are between Biden and the Chinese president Xi right now in San Francisco. I shudder to think what those conversations hold. Let's take a look at the next one. When the people feel the government, you have tyranny. Ron, you're correct. It's you know, something happened, and this isn't the subject of this particular live stream. I may do it tomorrow, but there's something that's happened that's really interesting, and I feel like I should bring it up based on this. During the War for Independence, and even the battle over the Constitution and the ratification of the Constitution, American thinkers used names like Publius and others to hide their identity so that people could read their arguments without both for safety purposes, but also so people read their arguments without taking sides based on who wrote them. And in a critical world, they took the messenger out of the argument, and they just let the argument stand on its own. And when we talk about tyranny, one of the things that a Republican presidential candidate, Nikki Haley, came out strongly in favor of with this week was the idea that there should be no anonymity on the web, on social media platforms. So if you want to be on X, Elon Musk's platform, you should be required to put your real name and give the people at X your real name and all your real information. It's taking away anonymity. Well, Nikki Haley apparently hasn't been paying attention to what's going on in the world, which kind of disqualifies her for being president. But how many conservatives have been debanked because they came out and said something in favor of President Trump? How many conservatives lost their job because they attended the rally on January 6th. Didn't go to the Capitol, just attended the rally. I can name three. How many conservatives have found that they are deplatformed because they had the audacity to say, gee, I think that ivermectin might work. The fact of the matter is, or to say, some of these claims on fraud, election fraud seem to have some legs. No, you're deplatformed. You're gone for 30 days because that kind of speech can't be had. In a world where the federal government is going after people, a world where the federal government is pushing banks to take away your bank account, pushing social media platforms to shut down your speech. In that world, you need anonymity. You need anonymity now every bit as much as supporters of the NAACP did in the 1950s when the state of Alabama attempted to get the membership list and the contributor list of the Alabama NAACP. And the Supreme Court decided in the 1950s that no, the NAACP does not have to give their membership list to the state of Alabama. And why? Because the state of Alabama was going to go after the people who gave money to the NAACP, the people who were members of the NAACP for political purposes. And it was found that being a member or a contributor to the NAACP was speech. And hence it was protected by the U.S. Constitution. Nikki Haley should know that. Nikki Haley should know that. Nikki Haley should see what's happening with the weaponization of government. Maybe should put a call into Jim Jordan, ask him about the weaponization of government committee. But no, Nikki Haley goes on and says, no, I think we need to eliminate anonymity. Well, Nikki Haley, if you think that, you are disqualified from being president of the United States because you haven't been paying attention, or you either haven't been paying attention, you're too dumb to understand, or you actually support the weaponization of government and the using government as a tool against your political enemies. None of those are acceptable. So you kind of set me off there. But when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. That is correct. But when the people who want to run government want to say, we want to find out everybody who's got an opinion on the internet so we can go after them. You better fear that. As well. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see what Michael Coulter has to say. I remember the day when the DOJ used to go after the bad guys. Now DOJ has specific orders to go after the good guys, aka us, Trump supporters, and it's a crying shame. Michael, you're right. The fact is, the Judicial Watch came out with some highly redacted documents just this week from the FBI related to their response when the order, the paper that came out of the Richmond office to look into Catholic churches in Richmond that said Latin Mass, and with all sorts of allegations about the need to investigate Catholic churches because of how they said Mass. And, they went into full scramble mode after that got leaked. Nobody was concerned about the content of it. They're concerned about the fact that people found out it was happening. And that tells you a whole system is corrupt. Nobody said the first reaction in that wasn't, oh my God, who came out with this? This is horrific. There was one email that alluded to it being bad, but in fairness. But by and large, it was, how do we cover our asses? That's what it was. And of course, it's highly redacted, so who knows what got redacted out. But that's what seems to have been the reaction of the FBI. After the fact, the FBI director, Wray, claimed that, I oppose that and we're not doing that and all that. But the fact of the matter is, did anybody get fired? No. Were there any ramifications? No. Was the policy even really rescinded? We don't know. That's the reality of the FBI and and DOJ. And it drives me, it breaks my heart. With that, I'm going to just let you go. I appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully this helps you understand the 4 cases and what's at stake, but also understand that the courts at this juncture are telling them you cannot take Donald Trump off the ballot. If that's your objective, you are going to fail. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the work you do and I do and all of us do in this upcoming year to determine who's president of the United States in 2025. And just pray to God that we end up with an answer that helps save this country. With that, this is Rick Manning signing off. I'll talk to you tomorrow.